Oh, back. Okay, I'm gonna. You edit the size. Wings acquired. Whew. Okay. my god. My love. Love of my life. Forgot my napkin. $4 million? I gotta watch this. Over $4 million taken, 5 years developed, no game released.
How to make sticker with sticker
I
app.
gotta watch
It's
this.
easy. First, make design. Then go.
A true sandbox survival horror. Fight to survive against a zombie-packed post-apocalyptic world that gives you, the player, freedom to choose how to do so. Settle down inside a house, fortifying the entrances with advanced expansive crafting and fortification systems, grow crops in a fully fleshed out farming system, and even build electrical devices to keep the lights on and the power tools working. Outside the potential safety of your house is a dangerous place where zombies might be the least of your worries. The massive, beautiful terrain of Alberta, Canada comes with a full weather system, day-night cycle, and of course other survivors that want what you have. Explore, fight, build, survive. This was the pitch for Dead Matter on their Kickstarter campaign back on July 17th, 2017. A dream game in a genre that has seen some of the most demand from gamers around the world since the breakout of DayZ mod back in May of 2012. DayZ managed to reach over 1 million players in just 3 months, eventually going on to become a standalone game that sold millions of copies around the globe. Dead Matter was described by many to be the ultimate delivery of what DayZ should have been, and yet, as of August 2022, has not delivered on that dream. So let's go back to where it all started, 10 years ago.
So Johnny, tell us what your mod is about.
Dead Matter is a open world zombie survival mod for Crisis 2. I had originally started working on it in November 2011, and now I'm kind of sitting right here.
In March 2012, the user Johnny Guitar created a project on popular video game modding website moddb.com titled Dead Matter. He can be seen as early as March 7th, 2012, replying to comments from those who found the entry and had excitement for the prospect of playing this game. This project was originally proposed as a mod for first-person shooter Crisis 2, but Johnny Guitar made it very clear he and his small team were looking to create a standalone version of the game to turn the fan project into a real business. The goal was a Kickstarter, but they needed more people on the team, and Johnny's idea for achieving this was to ask random users to private message him if they were interested in giving him money. At this point, a handful of screenshots and a music file were all that were on display, but there was a promise of a teaser trailer coming soon, with a playable download coming shortly after. On July 16th, the teaser released, and if you look back, it's pretty comically bad. Despite this, the comments were mostly full of excitement. The next update came 4 months later with developer vlog number 1, part 1 of 2, which released on November 27th, 2012, in which Johnny Guitar shows some technical aspects of the mod like bullet drop, zombies, as well as houses and barricading, and in the second part of the vlog, 11 minutes of in-game footage, running around, shooting zombies, looting things, driving vehicles, and commentary from its creator. Just over a week later, on December 9th, 2012, Reddit user Nickizor, which also happens to be Johnny Guitar, posted that the Dead Matter closed alpha was here. Users could finally get their hands on this Crisis 2 mod. Following this, they continued to develop the mod as well as working on an apparent standalone game, but it wasn't long until the drama started to kick in. An update that should have been available shortly after the closed alpha release was delayed until April of 2013, months later, due to a rogue staff member taking over the Dead Matter website and Facebook page. Following this, the mod was talked about less and less, and the focus was clearly on delivering a standalone experience which the developers would be able to monetize effectively. And then, nothing. They just stopped posting, they stopped talking about the mod, they stopped talking about the standalone, and everything just went dark. That is until on March 30th, 2016, a post appeared titled "After All This Time" on the since deleted website deadmatter.rocks. Unfortunately, due to the fact nobody archived these websites, all of the contents are completely missing. What remains are Reddit images and threads, usually with 1 or 2 comments, and often involving people discussing how they forgot they were even subscribed to the game's Reddit in the first place, and interest seemed to be
I've
at an
missed
all-time
this
low.
whole video.
That
Hold on.
is until December 13th, 2016, where Dead Matter made it onto Steam under the umbrella of the since-retired Greenlight program. Greenlight allowed for developers to get their game listed on Steam via popular vote. Within the first few days, Dead Matter had hundreds of comments and went on to become the 4th highest ranking game in the program's history. Needless to say, the interest for what they were trying to create was abundant. Just under 8 months later, on July 17, 2017, Dead Matter launched their Kickstarter campaign. The goal, as you'll often find on Kickstarter projects, was a laughably small amount, 60,000 Canadian dollars, which is around 50,000 US. Absolutely nothing in terms of making a game, but Dead Matter had been in development for 5 years already. Allegedly. The developers, now known as Quantum Integrity, were no longer just a man making a mod, it was an actual studio that had been incorporated. Within the Kickstarter, they do discuss this number and stipulate that within these $50,000, they budgeted to be able to pull off a successful early access game launch, which is where they will then gather the rest of funds required to finish the whole project. Of course, anything more is welcome and will mean additional features for the early access launch, but how it's worded is that if the Kickstarter succeeds, the game will make it to early access no matter what. Alongside this, they speak a handful of times about their transparent development process, the importance of showing everything to their fans, as well as their vow to never delete comments or silence the voices of their followers, an important promise that, while naive, does come into play a little bit later. Over the next 30 days until August 17th of 2017, the campaign went on to raise $285,784 Canadian, which is around 220,000 US. To raise this amount, the QI team presented what is referred to as stretch goals, in which they promise additional content or features for each milestone of funding reached. These stretch goals had planes and trains, including all infrastructure required to use them, a brand new map modelled after Vancouver Island, along with new enemies, weapons, clothes, vehicles, and places to explore, new interactive AI settlements and factions, radio and radio stations, modular gear, new weapons, enhanced Twitch support, and player-made structures. All of these goals are massive undertakings, especially for a small indie team who'd already committed to building a sincerely ambitious game using what is a team lead's annual salary to be divvied up amongst their entire company, minus taxes of course. Anyone familiar with this video series, video game development, or running a business will know that this would be impossible. However, it didn't stop people from believing in the dream, which I always say is much more important than the reality, especially when it comes to things people really want. 5,452 backers threw down their money in support, some of which were so convinced that they parted with thousands of dollars for packages that promised them things like 50 copies of the game, a producer credit, and an invitation to their launch party in Calgary, Alberta. Following the Kickstarter's massive success, QI immediately began selling packages on their own website store, giving latecomers the opportunity to buy in and support development of the definitive zombie survival experience, as well as launching an Indiegogo campaign on the 6th of February 2018 with a goal of $46,000, which went on to raise roughly $1.5 million in the next 30 days. At this point in the story, they've raised all the money they said that they needed, and I could run you through each development blog, which showed an impressively made game and many features people have been yearning for in this genre ever since the initial craze of DayZ mod. However, the most important and interesting parts of the story come from behind the scenes, as well as how the company acted towards fans that supported their shared vision. Dead Matter as a project has been plagued with delays since the very inception. All the way back in 2012 with the Crysis 2 mod, there have always been problems. Back then, it was a couple of friends with a shared love of what they were trying to create, and there was no money involved, which makes it much more acceptable to just get things done when you can and not be held to deadlines. When you become a business, ask for $80,000 and raise close to $2 million plus whatever they raised privately on their website, this becomes an issue. You're now a business making promises. You now have to worry about the perception of your game, the perception of the management, and what's going on with your community, as you are beholden to them. Each problem, each delay, each change brings with it disappointment, especially when no one has been able to even play what they expected to get in their hands years previously. The QI team seemed to talk a great game at this time. They showed juicy content in their frequent blogs, but seemed incapable of launching the product in a timely manner, even in an early access or closed alpha state. This led to people being rightly unhappy, and when they shared this opinion, you can guess exactly what happened. Censoring dissenting opinions, something the Kickstarter campaign vowed not to do, turning the Discord into a fairly unpleasant place, which was heavily moderated, with even slight criticism or questioning of information being met with incredibly unprofessional behavior and often bans.
Running a community like a dictatorship and then responding to criticism by hiding behind a bot to send sarcastic and petty remarks while simultaneously denouncing those same practices from your community members and then demanding their respect is a very bad look. Not only is it distasteful, but it's extremely unprofessional. It has been a continued problem in the Dead Matter community that you aren't allowed to question things or even engage in civil discourse if it does not fit the agenda of these mods and community reps and even partners.
The delays were not the only thing that were an issue. There was a lot of mixed messaging regarding the expectations of the constantly impending closed alpha. How would it happen? What would be the details? Many people familiar with alphas were bringing up the topic of an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, a contract signed by users to prevent them from discussing or showing materials covered under said contract under penalty of punishment, which would include a game ban, as well as potential civil lawsuits should the offender do any significant damage to the studio or their product. Multiple sources, including the CEO of the company, had answered this question frequently. The game would not be under NDA, they would continue to be transparent as they promised in their initial Kickstarter in Indiegogo. This changed as of roughly May 26, 2019, when the question came up again, and this time confirmed that an NDA would in fact exist for all closed alpha testers.
And a couple of months ago, we have been told that no, there wouldn't be any type of NDA, but now it seems like they have switched their mind. Now they are going to be implementing this in the closed alpha. I haven't seen any reasoning why they have done this, but what I can see is that it is going to be used to prevent any type of negativity to go out in the public. We do know that this is indeed a closed alpha, meaning it's going to be first launched to the backers, and we are going to be experiencing a lot of bugs and glitches.
Of course, at this stage, most of the promises made in the initial Kickstarter campaign were completely broken, banning users who had criticism for the team when they said they never would, locking the game state behind a legally binding contract, not delivering the product even in a diminished state by any of the estimated dates, and backers would soon be finding out that many of the promised features were nowhere near ready, flat out didn't work, or were scrapped altogether. A lot of the things that they were showing in the blogs simply wasn't in the game. So after years of delays, the alpha release was finally going to happen. On July 27th, 2020, a Reddit post detailed how to claim your alpha key from the QI software website, and anyone who backed at an appropriate level in the 3 years of prior crowdfunding would be able to do so. This, as with almost everything regarding Dead Matter, did not go as planned. There were thousands of users who had backed the game who could simply not see their purchase when registering on the website, therefore they couldn't redeem a key. That was if you were lucky enough to get the website to load, which the Dead Matter Twitter account acknowledged with their advice, stop pressing F5, referring to people refreshing the site over and over again in their attempt to gain access, but instead overloading the service with traffic. These problems, while frustrating, are expected when a game with tens of thousands of hype fans are about to finally get their hands on something they've been dreaming about for, in some cases, 8 years. With a little bit of communication from the devs and over a couple of days, these issues would resolve themselves. Instead of communicating, however, the developers claimed they were getting too much toxicity and locked down the Discord server. They also claimed the website was being DDoSed, which stands for Distributed Denial of Service, a malicious attack that aims to take a service offline by sending constant bombardments of traffic to that source. And while this could be true, realistically, this distraction was not the biggest issue. These problems were actually a blessing in disguise, just nobody in the public knew it as of yet. When the Discord server was opened again, there were constant updates from the team stating they would keep working to get keys sent out to backers. Behind the scenes, however, there was a key shortage. And I'm not talking about a few hundred of them missing, I mean tens of thousands. This was a massive issue that they knew about but didn't delay the launch, because that would have been seen as yet another delay. It was easier to just blame it on other factors. According to posts in the announcement section of the Dead Matter official Discord, this key problem persisted for about 5 days. Essentially what happened is that when Dead Matter was launching their closed alpha on the Steam platform, to do so they would need to request keys from Valve, the company who owns and operates Steam. Valve, for whatever reason, were holding these keys back from QI, which means there were none to give to the public who would back the game and required those keys to download and play. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to why exactly this happened, so to clear this up, I had conversations with multiple current or former employees of QI, which asked, of course, to remain nameless. Each person interviewed told the same story regarding the lack of preparedness for this launch, despite it being known about internally for a real long time and coming at the end of a 7-day public countdown. The keys they were due to give to backers were simply not requested until a couple days before the scheduled release, which means when Valve said no, there wasn't any leeway for them to solve the matter without doing a delay. According to these sources, they went ahead with the launch knowing full well they didn't have any keys to give people. The CEO, Nick Zorko, or Johnny Guitar as he's known from the start of the story, eventually convinced Valve to give them the keys, but it was in small batches. The reason Valve initially declined is the sheer volume of keys requested in such a short period of time. This illustrates a lack of foresight, planning, and competence directly from management, leaving the most integral part of the launch until the very last minute without any contingency plan really has no excuse at all. They were incredibly lucky that Valve worked with them to resolve it in a handful of days, or this could have been an even bigger blunder that was entirely avoidable given they had months to prepare the keys for distribution.
Damn.
To reiterate, they only requested the keys 24 to 48 hours prior to launch, were told no, and then decided to go through with the launch anyway. This situation brought about a massive issue for QI, the Dead Matter community, and the potential growth of the business. As part of the arrangement between Nick Zorko, the CEO, and Valve to get these tens of thousands of keys delivered for the closed alpha, Valve also stipulated that keys for the closed alpha could no longer be sold for Dead Matter on any platform until it was ready to be sold on Steam. The reason for this should be quite clear. Steam takes 30% cut on all sales, and QI was selling tens of thousands of keys on their website, well expecting Valve to generate those keys, have the game deployed on Steam, and get nothing at all in return. These messages updating the community, as with many messages in the official Dead Matter announcement server, comes from a user with a white name. Anyone familiar with Discord will know this means the user in question.
How are you, honey? Yeah, my honey, my sweetie. I'm having a super duper late dinner and watching some YouTube. How about you?
Is no longer in the server, meaning they no longer work with QI in any capacity, oftentimes actually being banned from the server due to, quote,
only on YouTube,
misinformation.
Not Twitch
So
right
after
now.
the issues with the keys had been resolved and people got into the game,
I think it was
clear
like
that
too much for my
development had not been
computer
going
to be
plan
live
thus
on
far.
YouTube and Twitch.
Despite the non-disclosure
I just have a
agreement,
normal
people were keen to share their
computer,
opinions
like,
online,
it's not a gaming
even if it
PC.
risked them a ban. It was rare to see a particularly good
She's
word
limited
spoken
in what
about
she
the
can
state of
do,
the closed
but
alpha
she's doing her
experience,
best.
unless the good word included a hope.
I'm glad
for the
you're having
future
a
of the
good
game.
day.
Maybe
I'm eating some
it will get there one
wings.
day. What they had
What
so
time
far
is it where
was
you are?
many years away from even mirroring what the DayZ mod
Where'd
had
you say you
delivered from
were?
a single
South Carolina?
developer 8 years prior from the standpoint of a fun game to play. The only footage that can be found online of Dead Matter
It's
is
getting late.
sourced officially
We
from
definitely
QI
should eat
themselves
something.
or special partnered content creators who will give
I'm
them
eating
permission to
some
stream
barbecue
and
wings,
post
but I
videos
ran
for
out of
specific
barbecue
periods
sauce.
of time during the test, and the comments under each of these videos mirror the sentiment of those who could not
But
speak out
I was
publicly.
super duper late
The
coming
game
online,
was
so
not worth the wait, and at this
it's
rate
9:16
may
for you?
never be. Now, to address non-disclosure agreements, I can't say that they're
Arizona.
not useful in certain
Oh my God, is it
limited
hot as hell over there?
situations. What I can say is that in gaming, they're often used in a way that hurts you way more than helps you. The closed alpha had reportedly over 60,000 users.
I'm watching
and
another
there is no way
Kickstarter
you will
nightmare
ever contain
video.
all of those opinions or prevent people from leaking footage. Having the NDA, however, shows
Yeah, they're really
that
good.
you are
It's
trying
just
to
like,
hide something.
I gotta
When
buy
you
some
claim
more sauce.
transparency and then your actions betray you, People will notice, and at that
But I'm
point,
still
you
gonna
might as
eat
well have
'em.
taken the negative publicity
Yeah,
for
I
an
love
alpha
wings
game
too.
having alpha game problems, as opposed to an alpha game having alpha game problems,
It's kind of a
as well
joke
as
on my
claims of
TikTok
silencing
that
people's
like I'm
opinions for a
always eating
product
wings.
that wouldn't even exist without their patronage.
I'm
Moving
scared
beyond
for
this, the
you
game has been in
too. I
development for
read
2
a lot
years
of the
since then,
news because,
and
you know,
not a
I'm
whole
big on
lot
the
has
environment.
changed. There are also a lot
So
of conspiracy theories in
terrifying
the
how
Dead Matter
freaking hot it
community
is.
regarding where the money went and how it may have been misplaced.
I know, right? These
For
videos
example,
are
some
crazy.
people are convinced that Nick Zorko, the CEO, bought himself a mansion, which I did my usual checks for, which include mortgage and land
We're
parcel
already
ownership
halfway done.
searches, speaking to
I'd
current
be
and
willing
former
to rewind
employees
this
and
one
other
if you
means,
want.
which turned up absolutely nothing. Dead Matter's problems have nothing to
Or we
do
can
with someone being
start a new
malicious
one.
or misplacing the funds. The issue is, has, and always will be complete and utter incompetence of management. The studio has faced such a high turnover in staff, as well as such a huge shift in game design and reworking old game design, rewriting old code, that is nowhere near launch despite
I
being
don't
in
know, though.
development for over 5 years
I
since
always
the
make
original
10 wings,
Kickstarter.
but
The public-facing
I'm
message
full
from
and I've only
QI
had
seems to
4.
be that they are
I'm, like,
heading
not
towards
that
an early
hungry
access
today.
release on Steam, which has been subjected to almost as many delays as the original closed alpha test was, and now is coming sometime in 2023. This brings with it the ability for them to start making money again, selling access to the game, and an
Yeah,
end
I
to the
mean, what do you
non-disclosure
do when it's
agreement, which
too
lets
hot to
people
live
show
there?
the state of Dead Matter without risking a lawsuit or having some kind of special permission. QI took on new studio management in September of 2021, who made sweeping changes to the way things were being handled, including closing all of development during January 2022, using
It's
that time
hot
to
in my
restructure
apartment, but I think
workflows
it's
and
because
organize the
it's
studio
cold
in a
here.
more
It's like
modern
40
manner.
degrees,
The
but
letter penned by this new studio head reads as if
I think my neighbor keeps their heat on and it like rises to the top, like the person that lives below me. Because it's always so hot in my apartment. But I don't mind it. At least I can like save some money on my energy bill, you know?
things have been run by cowboys for the previous 4 years, and he had to step in and add some order to the chaos. During this letter, Derek recognized the number one problem with development thus far had been a lack of...
Okay, I am going to rewind a bit. I mean, it's basically the same story over and over again. They said they were going to make a video game on Kickstarter. They made all of this money off the Kickstarter, and the game, like, still won't come out.
Taxes was chasing updates. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert, doing it all.
Alpha, meaning it's going to be first launched to the backers, and we are going to be experiencing a lot of bugs and glitches.
Of course, at this stage, most of the promises made in the initial Kickstarter campaign were completely broken.
Okay, I rewinded it a
So
bit.
after years of delays, the alpha release
Basically,
an appropriate leveling the 3 years of...
released like the first a first draft of the game, but the people, in order to get it, you need the links, and they didn't even request the links until the day before. This is like thousands of links, so it was delayed. But they lied about the
would be able
reason.
to do so. This, as with almost everything regarding
I
Dead Matter,
hate paying
did not.
utilities.
Website was being DDoSed, which stands
It's
for
so
distributed
annoying and unfair.
delay the launch, because that would have been seen as yet another delay. It was easier to just blame it on
I'd be
other
really
factors.
pissed if I had to pay
According
my water
to posts
bill.
in the announcement section of the Dead
Thankfully,
Matter
my
official
landlord
Discord,
pays
this
it.
key problem persisted for about 5
My
days.
me
Essentially what
landlord.
happened is that when Dead Matter was launching their closed alpha on the Steam platform, to do so they would need to request
Is
keys
your air
from
conditioning
Valve,
bill,
the
like,
company
through the
owns
roof?
and operates Steam. Valve, for whatever reason, were holding these keys back from QI, which means there were none to give to the public who would back the game and required those keys to download and play. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to why exactly this happened, so to clear this up, I had conversations with multiple current or former employees of QI, which asked, of course, to remain nameless. Each person interviewed told the same story regarding the lack of preparedness for this launch, despite it being known about internally for a real long time and coming at the end of a 7-day public countdown. The keys they were due to give to backers were simply not requested until a couple days before the scheduled release, which means when Valve said no, there wasn't any leeway for them to solve the matter without doing a delay. According to these sources, they went ahead with the launch knowing full well they didn't have any keys to give people. The CEO, Nick Zorko, or Johnny Guitar as he's known from the start of the story, eventually convinced Valve to give them the keys, but it was in small batches. The reason Valve initially declined is the sheer volume of keys requested in such a short period of time. This illustrates a lack of foresight, planning, and competence directly from management, leaving the most integral part of the launch until the very last minute without any contingency plan really has no excuse at all. They were incredibly lucky that Valve worked with them to resolve it in a handful of days, or this could have been an even bigger blunder that was entirely avoidable given they had months to prepare the keys for distribution. To reiterate, they only requested the keys 24 to 48 hours prior to launch, were told no, and then decided to go through with the launch anyway. This situation brought about a massive issue for QI, the Dead Matter community, and the potential growth of the business. As part of the arrangement between Nick Zorko, the CEO, and Valve to get these tens of thousands of keys delivered for the closed alpha, Valve also stipulated that keys for the closed alpha could no longer be sold for Dead Matter on any platform until it was ready to be sold on Steam. The reason for this should be quite clear. Steam takes 30% cut on all sales, and QI was selling tens of thousands of keys on their website, well expecting Valve to generate those keys, have the game deployed on Steam, and get nothing at all in return. These messages updating the community, as with many messages in the official Dead Matter announcement server, comes from a user with a right name. Anyone familiar with Discord will know this means the user in question is no longer in the server, meaning they no longer work with QI in any capacity, oftentimes actually being banned from the server due to, quote, misinformation. So after the issues with the keys had been resolved and people got into the game, it was clear that development had not been going to plan thus far.
Oh, and they made them sign an NDA, which is crazy.
People were keen to share their opinions online, even if it wished them a bad. It was rare to see a particularly good word spoken about the state of the closed alpha experience, unless the good word included a hope for the future of the game. Maybe it will get there one day. What they had so far was many, many years away from even mirroring what the DayZ mod had delivered from a single developer 8 years prior from the standpoint of a fun game to play. The only footage that can be found online of Dead Matter is sourced officially from QI themselves or special partner content creators who will give them permission to stream and post videos for specific periods of time during the test. And the comments under each of these videos mirror the sentiment of those who could not speak out publicly. The game was not worth the wait, and at this rate may never be.
Right, NDA
now, to address
is crazy.
Non-disclosure agreements, I can't say that they're not useful in certain limited situations. What I can say is that in gaming, they're often used in a way that hurts you.
You can't describe in any way your experience of the game.
The closed alpha had reportedly over 60,000 users, and there is no way you will ever contain all of those opinions or prevent people from leaking footage. Having the NDA, however, shows that you are trying to hide something. When you claim transparency and then your actions betray you, people will notice, and at that point, you might as well have taken the negative publicity for an alpha game having alpha game problems, as opposed to an alpha game having alpha game problems, as well as claims of silencing people's opinions for a product that wouldn't even exist without their patronage. Moving beyond this, the game has been in development for 2 years since then, and not a whole lot has changed. There are also a lot of conspiracy theories in the Dead Matter community regarding where the money went and how it may have been misplaced. For example, some people are convinced that Nick Zorko, the CEO, bought himself a mansion, which I did my usual checks for, which include mortgage and land parcel ownership searches, speaking to current and former employees, and other means, which turned up absolutely nothing.
I have writer's block so
problems have nothing to do with
coming up with an original concept, and just the fact that it takes years for a good game to come out. Like
complete and utter
the idea of working on one project for years.
The studio has faced such a high turnover in staff, as well as such a huge shift in game design and reworking old game design, rewriting old code, that is nowhere near launch despite being in development for over 5 years since the original Kickstarter.
5 years.
The public-facing message from QI seems to be that they are heading towards an early access release on Steam, which has been subjected to almost as many delays as the original closed alpha test was, and now is coming sometime in 2023. This brings with it the ability for them to start making money again, selling access to the game, and an end to the non-disclosure agreement, which lets people show the state of Dead Matter without risking a lawsuit or having some kind of special permission. QI took on new studio management in September of 2021, who made sweeping changes to the way things were being handled, including closing all of development during January of 2022, using that time to restructure workflows and organize the studio in a more modern manner.
Real
the
gaming
letter penned by this new studio head reads
what is
as
the
if
big
things
deal?
had been run by cowboys for
is
the
it like
previous
not
4
enough
years,
money?
and he had to step in and add
I would
some
hire
order
a
to the
fucking
chaos.
project manager.
During this letter, Derek recognized the number one problem with development thus far had been a lack of clear direction, which is definitely not something you want to be hearing from somebody 4 years into development. On top of this, he touched upon the fact that many employees had changed over the years. What he didn't mention is that the actual number one problem with the studio was management. Management he was now part of, and he was about to be the cause of multiple other employees leaving the studio as well. According to these people I interviewed, the management of QI has always been troublesome. Nick spent too much time and money where it wasn't required, such as hiring office space for a mostly international and remote team, constant rewrites of code that didn't need to be rewritten, removing of code, art, or features that were made by team members who left the project, which was a frequent occurrence, hiring of and promoting of people who were not fit for the position, and much, much more. While this was supposed to be Nick's vision, he would often disappear from meetings, stop replying to urgent messages regarding issues or direction for the game, and instead work on programming or reprogramming systems that were not a priority or wouldn't even make it into the game, while also constantly making public promises of release dates that were never even discussed with the team, leaving them to find out only when they browsed the public Discord server and knew that the date was impossible to meet based on the current state of the game internally.
Oh my gosh.
When they tried to bring this up with Nick, he was often dismissive, sometimes abusive and angry. Multiple employees told me it was commonplace for Nick to scream at people during meetings,
stealing the money.
especially if they were critical of something relating to the game or his actions. That is, of course, if he was in meetings at all. This means management was left up to whoever was his right hand at the time. The two that were talked about had different issues. One of them was prior to the restructuring we just went over that happened in late 2021, and this manager was known as Metamoth. He was simply too inexperienced for the job, which was not just studio manager, but also that of the lead level designer. The level design that, of course, when he left, was part of a complete recreation yet again, because it was so bad. The situation as it was described to me was that experienced team members who knew what they were doing and worked on a lot of games were constantly being mismanaged by Nick and Metamoth, making them perform tasks in ways that didn't make sense, that the team knew would be a waste of resources, but knew better than to push back as they had seen people be mocked, laughed at, and fired for doing so previously. On top of this, due to Nick's propensity for making promises to the fans about release dates without consulting anybody within the team, the employees were under constant crunch, so much so that management would literally track their Steam profiles to criticize them if they'd been playing too many games in their spare time and not coming into work instead. Commenting on their relationship status and how they needed to focus more on work, trying to manipulate them to stay for longer hours with remarks like,
also, it's
you were like a
this
brother
is what
or
happens
sister
when
to
men
me
are in charge.
if they were to be found
they
leaving while others
need
were
a
still
female
crunching,
project
or receiving
manager
work texts
to
at 4
keep them on
a.m.,
task.
calls late into the evening, and much, much more. On
Or,
top of
I
this,
mean, any
despite
project
the terms
manager,
being
but
agreed upon during interviews before they were joining the team,
clearly
it wasn't
cannot
uncommon for people to be waiting weeks or
run,
months for their pay.
you know, a
And if
team.
all
Just because
that
you have a
wasn't
good
bad
idea
enough, then
doesn't
I'll
mean
read
that
you
you're
quote
a
from
good
one of my
leader,
interviews.
you know?
After leaving QI, my co-workers and I found some interesting portions of the, at the time, recent blogs that related to us or others, essentially blaming the game's issues on past members. These blogs were all written by the studio manager at the time. I'd like to also mention that all the issues mentioned in these blogs were never brought up with me or the rest of the team because, like I said before, the studio manager never gave feedback or took steps to fix the issues, and Nick seemed to be completely unaware of them. When we did bring up these blogs to Nick, he was furious in our DMs, saying this was, quote, unacceptable, I can't believe this happened, this is disgusting behavior, etc. Unfortunately, nothing ever happened to the studio manager other than a slap on the wrist and a lame, forced apology. As a result of this, most of the experienced team who could have made the game left for greener pastures, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy of digging the game into a deeper hole, as with each person leaving, Nick or the studio head would decide that their work needs to be changed or removed entirely, wasting more and more resources. After this, in late 2021, they replaced the studio manager with Derek, whom was an entirely different manager. Many employees had hope that with this new hire, the tide would shift in favor of a more professional work environment that would be competently handled for once. and they were wrong. Inexperienced, passive-aggressive, rude, and a yes-man for Nick is how the new studio head is described by many. When speaking to the unnamed sources, I asked each of them
Him
if the
arresting
game
the
was a
past,
scam.
I mean, him
They all
interviewing
said
the
no,
past
but it would
employees
likely have
is
been a better
so
result
crazy.
if
He
it had
in
been one.
everybody's
The money has been
business.
spent on good faith creation of dead matter, just in a way that is so terribly misguided that most of it has been
Yes,
wasted.
gotta have a
I also
female
asked if they
CEO,
believe the game will
period.
ever fully release. This was when each of them told me a different worded version of no. They all believe that money is getting tighter, which is why Nick was constantly stressed about paying out employees what they were owed. His lack of ambition in replacing the senior staff that himself and management alienated, causing them to leave the company, as well as constantly trying to rush this early access release for a game that he knows is years away from being ready for public consumption. The recent push for the early access Steam launch likely comes out of necessity and not because the game is ready. If the game launches into early access, the shroud of a non-disclosure agreement will do them no further good, and the negative reviews will tank the game's reputation more than it already has been, while not bringing in any sufficient sum of money to turn the tide, as money has never been the issue. In fact, Dead Matter had a budget infinitely bigger than anyone could have hoped for, and orders of magnitude higher than what the original Kickstarter pitch claimed to need. What many people do not know is that Dead Matter and QI as a studio are living on borrowed time and have been for a
Right.
while. The crowdfunding money ran out long ago.
Yeah,
The
we would
majority of
never
it was
know the
wasted
truth.
in code, art, employees that have since come and gone. The question people should have been asking: how do you keep expanding your team while having no source of income?
Why is this flashing?
The answer, according to the people I interviewed, is that QI received heavy investment from none other than everyone's favorite mega corporation from China, Tencent. Now, this is not out of the ordinary for gaming, as Tencent have been doing their very best to gobble up as many Western development studios and games as they possibly can, big or small. For QI, though, this investment came with strings attached, and those strings have been cut by the incompetent management. The development of Dead Matter has seen no significant progress, the money Tencent handed over has been wasted, and is mostly ran out. Tencent is angry and will hand over no further investment. Therefore, according to some sources, QI fired most of their art team, is no longer actively hiring despite publicly appearing to do so, and pushing out this early access client despite knowing it is not ready for public consumption to just keep the lights on at the studio and continue to try to deliver on Dead Matter as they promised. The new studio manager, Derek, who joined at the back end of 2021,
Oh my God,
left
it's like
another
becoming
company
recent.
who he ran into the ground and was on the verge of bankruptcy to do so. Joining QI, he was supposed to be the literal savior of the whole game and the development studio. He was even paid more money than the CEO, a number that people find ridiculous, considering he is now leaving the company just over a year later in a worse state than how he found it. This leaves management entirely up to Nick. The guy whose only experience in game dev comes from making Gary's mod servers and seems not to have learned much about managing a studio while
Caretaker.
having done so in the last 4 years.
Caretaker to CEO is crazy.
So many people requested this video, as Dead Matter has an incredibly high number of disgruntled backers and ex-employees. However, unlike in many of the other Kickstarter to court series, they seem to suffer from incompetence and not from malevolence. The only court that Dead Matter is going to, at least for now, is the court of public opinion. There doesn't seem to be any misappropriation of funds from my investigation. They are offering refunds to people who back the game and are unhappy with current development, and they're still actively trying to work on an eventual release. Although in my opinion, it's unlikely to materialize in any way that delivers on what people got excited about all those years ago. And if people were to ask for refunds in any sizable amount, it's very likely the studio would straight up fold, as they have no income source, no investment source, and development is draining what little remains in the coffers. Some of the ex-employees told me that they were waiting for thousands of dollars, some of them tens of thousands of dollars worth of back pay that in some circumstances is still unpaid. So to recap what exactly went wrong. At the time of crowdfunding, the CEO Nicholas Sorka was a 20-year-old with no commercial game development experience, no shipped games, and he was just a hobbyist modder. This was the
20
least
years
of his
old and he
problems,
raised
as the
like
CEO
$4
doesn't
million.
need to be writing code, although if they got less funding, he would have needed to be a more integral part, so that experience would have helped. The issue is he has even less experience in running a multi-million-dollar software studio with dozens of employees to manage and picking the right people to put in the right
Damn,
management
I mean, can you
positions.
really
The
blame
project
them? They're
started
only
out with
20
claims of
years old.
transparency and ended with a legally binding document to
But
prevent
still.
transparency due to the knowledge the game was a mess and people shouldn't be talking about it. They started out with a promise to never ban or silence
Like,
the fans who gave
wow.
them money to pursue the dream, and ended with a community where users are
I
scared
would
to
have
share
quit
their
on the spot.
criticism for
What would
fear
you
of
do? And
reprisals.
you
They started
get
out
the
with delivery
money?
estimates
Like,
that have been
what
missed by
would you
years,
do?
with many
No,
more
I would
years
just
to
hire
go
people.
before
I
the
mean,
deliverables are met for even the initial vision back in 2017.
you
They
could
started
hire
out
one
independent
person and
ended
then
up
they could
suckling
just
from
do
the money
everything.
tap of Tencent
You
and
have the
still couldn't
money.
leverage that
The
into
hardest
a
thing
competently
would be the
run
money.
studio or any kind of minimum viable product to maintain funding. Overall, they failed to create what they sold to people, at least for now. And we can assume
Damn,
from
and had
constant
a
delays and the
deal with a
illuminating employee
Chinese
testimony
developer? Like,
that the CEO
crazy.
didn't handle the job well, which means ill intention is not required for money to have been wasted. If the CEO ran away with the money or bought a house, that's of course fraud. He didn't do that. But he did waste people's money on incompetent management, and the result is very nearly the same. Whichever way you look at it, whether it was by malevolence or incompetence, all the money's gone, and there's a very slim chance that people get the game they paid for. The game is almost unrecognizable in terms of scope compared to their initial vision, with the map being stripped down in both quality and size for the upcoming early access Rush launch. And according to every source I interviewed, not even one of them had any hope that this game would be finished one day. All these things and more have given people reason to lose all faith in the studio, and therefore the game that they were supposed to deliver. I can't personally blame the CEO, because all he did was have a dream to deliver a game, and then people were naive enough to give him the money to try, without looking into his personal experience or understanding just how hard it is to make a good product. Realistically, the biggest studios in the world, with the most experience you can possibly have, with funding beyond your wildest imagination, can make bad games, can make failures. So expecting a massive, ambitious game to come out of a studio without any of these things is unreasonable to begin with. That would make you the
It would have been a
exception,
really
not
cool
the rule,
game,
and something
though.
you shouldn't really be betting on
Like,
happening.
that's what sucks.
It is
Like,
not
it's a cool
crime
idea.
to think you can do something and then fail. Even if I personally believe you should not try to fulfill your dreams by standing on the shoulders, or more aptly, the stacks of cash from those who lack the information to make the decision to let you do so.
No, the emote was crazy. And then the fact that there's only 3, like, they really couldn't add a 4th emote to, like, finish it off. Wow, that's it. Wow. Oh my gosh. Do we watch this? Whoa, this is an hour and a half long. That's too long, mamas. That's a bit too long. Does he have, like, a playlist of these? Who is Kira? Kira! I'm Kira. All of these look exactly the same. This is the one that we just watched. It's a good idea because people love games with zombies, but they did such a poor decision not hiring people. Yeah. I mean, poor guy. He was only 20 years old, but like, damn. Like, what did you think was... I mean, after you raised the money, wouldn't you start thinking like, well, okay, we reached the goal. Like, I actually have to make this game now. What do I do? I don't know. To have the confidence of some of these guys is insane. Like, I have my own business and I'm constantly like taking meetings with people trying to figure out what I should do. Like, I'm always getting a second opinion. I'm always trying to talk to people who know more than me. And I'm not even 20. I actually have experience. Thank you for the likes. Anyway, should we watch another one? Developers vanished. 0 game lawsuit filed. Oh, these are short though. I like the long ones. They're so dramatic. I think I watched this earlier today by myself. 10 years developed, totally different game delivered. I think that's a good one. What do you think,
During the early
Yeshi?
2010s,
Okay, let's do it.
we saw the rise of a rebellious method of video game creation, Kickstarter. The platform opened doors to new possibilities. Prior to
Oh, no.
Kickstarter,
Why? Why is my computer stuttering? Stop. I gotta close some windows. Hold up.
So for those who don't know, I'm
Let me just close all of this. Okay.
if you wanted a game to be funded, you needed deep pockets or a corporate overlord who would most likely strip mine your creativity for massive profits. A trade-off that became increasingly popular. With Kickstarter, however, all you needed was an idea that captivated your target audience enough to dip into their own pockets up front. And since the pitch of your idea would directly correlate to how much money the public would give you, those ideas ranged from humble to outrageous.
Damn.
Inevitably, some people
We're asking
used
for
this
$2
platform
million.
for good, to prove that there were people and ideas out there that could shake up the industry, and some used it for bad, to enrich themselves or to lie to hopeful fans. This is a story about one of those
Protect
ideas,
Phoenix.
but was it created for good reasons or bad? Let's find out.
Hello? A sponsorship? No, man. I'm out of the game. It's been a year. Raid Shadow Legend? No, I'm good. They're offering
What is this?
how much
Is this
money?
Kira?
Oh my god.
4.6 out of 5 on the Google Play Store, with almost 2 million
Oh my god, a sponsorship.
hopeful dreams,
An
and
ad.
absolute nightmares, but cooler and with less.
Okay.
On August
Whoa,
12,
secret
2013,
ad.
the Kickstarter
I didn't
website
think he was
saw
a ginger.
newly listed game development project with a simple and yet brilliant title, Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix is a JRPG with a squad-based RTS game design brought to you by veteran developers and creators from the East and the West. The project goal
Diablo?
was set at a meager sum
I can see that,
of
yeah, with the red.
$100,000. Clearly, an absurdly low amount for what they were planning to build, but people didn't know any better.
Little Red Riding Hood.
Damn.
Let's start the story a different way. It was dark inside the wolf.
Yet. For context, Kickstarter, as I record this video in 2023, is not the same Kickstarter that Project Phoenix launched on almost a decade ago. If an ambitious project asked for $100,000 now, it would likely be laughed at instead of being funded. Back then, however, Kickstarter was a new frontier, one that was seeing incredible
Damn, I should have
success
got on
for
Kickstarter
very
back
little
then.
substance.
I think
You had
that was
everything
Kira,
from
yeah.
legendary developers arriving with
In a
lofty
hot tub.
promises to unknown strangers with reasonable expectations, and no one seemed to know what was possible, or most importantly, for how much. Projects like Richard Garrett's Shroud of the Avatar had already raised close to $2 million. Chris Roberts' Star Citizen was already in the tens of millions of dollars of crowdfunding, and dozens of games each month were being funded successfully. The hype was real. Of course, in hindsight, no project manager worth their salt would claim to create a AAA game for $100,000 unless they were lying or just lowballing the goal in order to get a successful funding window. You see, Kickstarter works on an all or nothing basis. If you set it at $100,000 and it gets 99,000 in pledges by the end date, everyone's refunded and the creator gets nothing.
Damn.
Which means you are incentivized by the platform to lowball your actual goal and just hope you raise more money than you advertise as needed. A critical flaw in the system for the crucial component of transparency. This essentially means if you do pass your lowballed goal, but know that you need more, the game will be unlikely to materialize, but the backers will still be out of pocket for what they rightfully assumed was a completely funded project. As for Project Phoenix specifically, just why was their goal so unreasonable?
Project Phoenix is a revolutionary Japanese role-playing game, combining scope-based real-time strategy mechanics with a grand expansive world, compelling story, amazing soundtrack, and a fun, intuitive gameplay. You can expect the best people to be working on this project. Top designers, artists, programmers, and composers from around the world coming together to create an authentic, original
Why would this
JRPG
be the
experience.
video?
First, on the face of it
Looks
all,
like it would have been a fire
created
game.
to AAA standards and claiming to leverage, quote, top Eastern and Western
I need him to
creators
play
who have
another
worked on
clip.
many blockbuster game titles, is a work of complete fiction. $100,000 in the real world of business is a month of a medium-sized studio salary budget for full-time workers. Sure, it sounds like a large sum of money to a lot of people, and especially for a crowdfunding campaign in 2013, but in reality, it's really nothing. Not even enough to hire a single senior top talent programmer in any large developed city. So why did people expect a full game for this price? Well, pretty simply, it's because that's what they were told, and people didn't know any better, at least yet. The red flags are actually worse though. You see, the project also claimed to have talent who worked on some of the most prestigious, expensive, and beloved game franchises on the entire planet, meaning they are unlikely to be low-paid, entry-level employees or hobbyists, which would also increase the budget. Not only this, but Project Phoenix also promised to launch on multiple devices: Windows, Mac, Linux, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, iOS, and Android, as well as fully voice acted in Japanese and English, with subtitles for those as well as German, bringing a massive additional cost to the creation that would elevate even the most reasonable indie game to a much larger budget. All of this combined made the project
Why would they say it's going to be released on that many consoles? Why would they say
there would be
that?
No scams or complete
when they don't
failures
have
from
any
this new
money?
Frontier, and people were just simply too excited about
Oh
the
my god,
possibilities.
if you had seen it,
When
would
then
you have
add
given them
incredible
money?
names of people who would, of
You would
course,
have donated,
never
wouldn't you?
harm their reputation for just a little bit of cash, you could get funding now for basically anything based on that. It essentially came down to this: the flashier the trailer, the more
He's so
heartfelt the
cute.
pitch, the easier it was to hook an audience. For this reason, Project Phoenix managed to raise
He looks
just
very
over
serious.
$1 million US in their 30-day funding window, reaching close to 16,000 JRPG fans, some of which decided to hand over $10,000 each to have their chance to design characters within the game, as well as to access launch parties and more.
2 people gave
Reading the Kickstarter
10K?
page,
Are you freaking
it's clear
kidding?
to see that the creator knew exactly
Where did they get
what
that
to
money?
leverage in order to win hearts
That's
and
like
minds.
$30,000
How exactly
today.
to stoke the ashes in just the right way, causing the phoenix to rise.
Look, yes.
The pitch speaks of a revolution in the gaming industry, setting new standards of excellence for the Japanese market, bypassing large gaming studios and going back to when games were designed with love, passion, and interest rather than corporate money grubbing. To forsake new technologies that made games prettier but more shallow, to go back to what made us all fall
I don't
in love
understand
with
how
games
they
to
would,
begin with.
how they
An
could claim
incredibly
to
compelling
release on.
message,
It was
one
like
built
6
upon emotion,
consoles.
from
Like
a roster of
actual
individuals who would
famous
demand
companies don't
immediate
even do
respect for
that.
their contribution to our
You get
enjoyment
3.
as gamers. And
Xbox,
you too could be part of
PlayStation,
this revolution,
Steam.
a part of this history.
That's it.
All you needed to do was pledge. People even ignored very realistic red flags. For one, the team page was fleshed out with names and faces who would connect back to games like LA Noire, Final Fantasy, Halo, Crysis, Super Smash Bros, Skyrim, Assassin's Creed, Metal Gear Solid, and more. But for the names listed, there were also some that were hidden. Actually, the most important names: the lead programmer and art supervisor were left blank, stating they could not announce the involvement until much later in development. Strange. But who cares, right? With so much experience and such a fantastically crafted Kickstarter page, there's no way anything could go wrong.
I want to see some gameplay, like, what's it look like?
Especially since these people really cared. But believing them was simply a mistake that took an incredibly insane journey from beginning to end, a mistake that backers could not believe.
Incredibly
and are still angry
insane, you
about
say?
to this very day.
Stall
This was
Phoenix.
it. The moment everyone had waited for was finally here. The JRPG to
Baldur's Gate
change
did an
the
update on
world,
PC
to
months prior.
revolutionize the
Yeah.
industry, and it had arrived.
What the hell?
As you would expect, the comments on this video are brutal. The downvotes tell the story of
That's the
expectations
game?
versus reality. The tightrope that is walked when selling a warm, comfortable dream, but delivering the cold wet truth of reality like a bucket of ice water to the face. This gameplay was unbelievably different to what people expected. How could it be this bad over a year into the proposed 2-year development time? Some people who defended the project would give a clear answer. This was just a demo, designed specifically actually to raise additional funds through VC, venture capital. But no one who already had the sunk cost of buying this project would be giving it more, let alone newcomers with a keen eye for a deal. To begin with, this was confusing.
This looks like
as
Clash
chasing
of
VC
Clans.
money and investors contradicted the entire idea of crowdfunding from Kickstarter. This was sold as being unshackled from corporate business interest, but was already seeking to return, essentially using the public's money to create the carrot to lure in the suit-wearing horses. That, however, was the least of people's concerns. You see, when angling to raise money, you would put your absolute best foot forward, and if this was the best foot of Project Phoenix, it might need to be amputated. Still, some fans remained hopeful, recognising that this was early footage and things could change. Things would change. It must. By early 2015, around a year and a half after the Phoenix had risen, people were starting to ask difficult questions. These questions would often hang in the air like an ominous presence, rarely finding answers. The creator of the Project Phoenix Kickstarter and CEO of Studio CIA, Creative Intelligence Arts,
JRPG roleplay
Hiroaki
game. What
Yora,
does the J
had
mean,
launched and
Junior?
received full funding for
JRPG?
yet another Kickstarter project just a year after the Project Phoenix success. This time, it was for an anime science fiction thriller called Under the Dog. UTG asked for $580,000 US
Joystick
this time
roleplay game?
for a singular 24-minute episode, but instead received $878,000 from
Japanese.
just over 12,000 eager backers.
The J
Despite
stands for
the
Japanese.
success of the UTG Kickstarter, many people from Project Phoenix were very angry about this situation. So far, all that they had received from Project Phoenix was a terrible vertical slice of gameplay that existed to try to lure in additional funding, some music, and, of course, some empty promises. Now the creators were going to be spreading themselves thin with a second project, as well as taking more money from the public, despite not delivering for what they'd already sold. It just wasn't right, but what could they do except for wait? Maybe it would turn out to be okay.
Wow,
But
I'm
as
so
people
thankful
waited,
for Love and
things
Deep
started to
Space.
go from bad
It
to
looks
worse.
really great.
The studio tasked with creating the animation from the second Kickstarter had already parted ways with the project, citing, quote, creative differences. According to this quote, there was a high possibility of money not being enough to actually fulfill backer rewards, as well as, quote, practically no budget set aside for operational costs, which the writer concludes would probably mean that they were assuming to have work done by volunteers. This left backers of Project Phoenix asking very important questions. Where did the almost $900,000 go if there was no budget for operational costs? And most importantly, if the animation was so badly mismanaged, what state was the game going to be in with the same leadership? Hiroaki Yora rushed to announce these concerns in a Kickstarter post dedicated to creating a merch store for the thus far failed to materialize Project Phoenix. In this, he said that, quote, "We want to ensure you that nothing on Under the Dog will affect Project Phoenix going forward." He then ended it with a call for game developers to look forward to chances to work at the studio, a very concerning update Considering the date of February 12th, 2015, just months away from the scheduled release date for the full game.
Oh shit.
This was just the base of the cake, though. The very confusing icing was
We're
about to come
hiring
5 days
a
later,
few months
when they
before the
announced
game's
call
supposed to come
for
out.
Unreal Engine developers. You might think, why is this a big deal? Well, if we rewind to the initial Kickstarter pitch, you're going to notice that the development was
they're
being
using
conducted in
Unity.
Unity, a completely different game engine entirely.
Why do they do
This was
that?
accompanied by a quote that reads, "Our
This is
lead
the second
programmer
video
is a
where they've done
leading
that.
Unity programmer in the world, and he's constantly being asked to join the Unity team." This is incredibly significant. You see, changing a game engine is a massive, massive undertaking, one that you would not do unless you had very little work complete or had no other option, especially when they were 18 months into full-scale production. A change to the game engine could mean most of the work that they completed thus far would need to be almost entirely recreated, wasting precious resources on an already underfunded project. The reason for this will all become very clear a little bit later, but for now, it was yet another red flag for Project Phoenix.
15,
One
almost
that was yet again addressed by
16,000
the ever-present
people
and vocal
backed
leader,
this guy.
Hiroaki Yora.
Poor
Now we make
Hiraki.
stickers at Sticker App. First, we fix the image
Poor
file. Then
Hiraki.
prints
Want some
very
stickers?
large
Ayy,
print. Cut it
dab.
with
That's cute.
Unity had a lot of underdeveloped tools we need to create the game, so our team made a decision to move to Unreal, which would cut development time and mess a lot. Now we fast forward through some of the quiet times to the next major update on Project Phoenix, August 19th, 2015. Almost 2 years since Hiroaki Yora raised over 10 times his initial budget to birth Project Phoenix, and today, this is what they had to show for it.
This is
Clearly
the
a
game.
that by late 2015 looked almost unrecognizable from dime a dozen iOS and Android game releases, and absolutely nothing like the future of JRPGs that fans expected to see. The comments, of course, reflected the disappointment from backers, many of which pointed out that the game on display was vastly inferior to what other Kickstarter projects had produced, with less money and none of the claimed AAA development talent of Project Phoenix. This was just the beginning though, as the bad news kept on coming. On December 11th, 2015,
Do they know they have 30 minutes?
the prolific investigative games journalist Jason Schreier posted an article outing the current state of CIA's miserable situation. The previous mysterious Unity developer was, in
Damn,
fact, David
Hiroki!
Clark from Moon Studios,
Oh, poor
creator
guy.
of indie sensation game Ori and the Blind Forest. According to Hiroaki
Should have just
Yora,
been
from
filming
the very beginning of the
Salaryman
Kickstarter,
thirst traps on
they had been
TikTok.
waiting on Clark to come on board and dedicate his time to creating Project Phoenix, but to this date, he'd simply not been able to transition from his own work, meaning the project had been without a lead programmer since the very beginning.
What?
Instead of filling this void, they simply waited for a 14-month delay, then waited some more before finally deciding to move on, bringing the total wait to over 2 years for a developer who never materialized. To many, this email to Schreier proved Hiroaki Yora to have been telling half-truths at best and lies at worst since the very beginning. He had claimed the game would be created by this mysterious developer, released just 2 years after the Kickstarter ended, but never had the developer hired or available, and yet continued to claim things were going to plan, despite still not having the most important piece in the game development puzzle. This now explained why they were swapping from Unity 18 months into development, because the Unity programmer they waited almost 2 years for never arrived. All of that time and money had been wasted, without a word to the backers.
Wait,
The
so
Schreier
who are they
article ended with
paying?
Yora claiming to have a new programmer, a revelation that the game was just a part-time project with increased scope, and an itinerary of the game's development. He even said in the email that this was purely a weekend job, which turned to be a shocking reveal to the fans. According to those fans, at no point during this Kickstarter did they claim the project would be part-time. Maybe to the discerning few, of course, $100,000 would not have been enough for even part-time talent to create a game of this scale, but when the Kickstarter raised $1 million and never mentioned otherwise, people of course would have expected the game to be the focus of those involved. After all, they said 100k in 2 years would get the game done, so how does 1 million in 2 years not get the game done? Overall, this information was a slap in the face for everybody. People eventually went back and proofread the Kickstarter page,
Oh, it's making me
looking for
dizzy.
any information that would indicate otherwise. The only line in the entire $1 million pitch that could even be read in this manner is as follows. Each member of our team has taken a creative leap of faith in joining the project. Many of them have taken time out of their personal schedule to
2 years
contribute
without
their
a
expertise
lead
toward Project
programmer?
Phoenix's success.
What the fuck?
For the backers, they
So
did not
where-
consider this
where
to
was
be
the money
sufficient
going?
disclosure that the project was a weekend job for the entire team. They of course felt betrayed by the revelation, and with this, 2015 ended, and with it, any meaningful updates for quite a while. By this point, the community had mostly given up. They thought it was over, that the
The
Phoenix had
cover
stalled,
looking like
and all
that,
hope
and then the
was
game
lost.
looking like that. Like, was it supposed to be that kind of game? Like, what kind of game was it supposed to be? Triple A.
On September 19th, 2016, a new game appeared on the forever changed website Kickstarter. By this time, most of the initial hype of the platform had been killed by those who exploited the early adopters' naivety, hype, and goodwill. Projects had come with nothing but ideas, raised millions of dollars, and delivered nothing but disappointment.
Damn.
The users who remained to back projects without clearly solid foundation was now dwindling, and belief in anything crowdfunded was at an all-time low. This didn't stop Area 34 Incorporated though, and their new project, Tiny Metal, asking for a very small goal of $50,000 to bring a recreation of Nintendo's incredibly popular Advance Wars series. This project claimed to have a host of industry veterans, many of which were apparently unable to declare their identity or involvement with the project. They also claimed to have been involved in some, quote, epic-scale JRPGs, adventure games and fighting games we have developed and continue to work on. Tiny Metal also had the goal of creating something
Okay,
that
so
big
this
companies
must be
simply
what
would not do,
JRPG
to take a neglected
is,
genre from
like
the past
little stuff
and give it the love that it deserves. In hindsight,
on a map.
the pitch looked and read almost identical
I didn't
to
know what
Project
that
Phoenix, an almost beat-for-beat recreation, though not a single name connection with each other. Unlike Project Phoenix though, Tiny Metal was a product of its time. They failed to reach their funding goal of $50,000 within the 30-day window and walked away without a penny of the public's money. Proof that despite a great trailer, big names, and a ton of effort in the campaign with a low cost, people were mostly done with trusting game development on this website. Looking back at Project Phoenix and their situation during this time, it was now April 23rd, 2017.
Wait, how does that
almost
tie in?
4 years since the funding and over 2 years late for delivery. There was no more gameplay to show, simply a text update from Daniel Dresler, far too long to go over here. Essentially, he talked about the money, which was short, development, which was mismanaged, and plans that didn't work out. There was also a hint that was dropped within that no one put together until a little bit later. Essentially, the word tiny is said repeatedly, claiming that they already had a new team using new money, and with this new tiny game, they would be raising money from investors and sales in order to finally finish Project Phoenix with better and higher quality assets and features. The message ends with a massive new problem. We've seen other projects release at quality below fans' expectations, and we are putting our all into avoiding such a fate. In other words, they expected fans to not only believe that this is a reason for no release, but to be thankful for it. That they as developers were worried about fan expectations being too high for what they had created, so instead they were going to release nothing, at least for now.
What?
The proposed solution from Daniel was that if the tiny project was successful, as they hoped, Project Phoenix would be delivered, which you can read between the lines. This also said if the tiny project wasn't successful, Project Phoenix would not be delivered, which now made this incredibly convoluted. Essentially, they had a first Kickstarter which claimed to need $100,000, which raised $1 million, then a second Kickstarter which raised $800,000 for an unrelated anime. But still, they were saying that they needed more, and nothing could really prepare fans for what was about to happen next. In September 2017, Hiroaki Yora appeared at PAX West for an interview with PC Gamer. If you now look on screen,
he's doing
nowhere
interviews?
is CIA or Project Phoenix mentioned in the overlay. Instead, it states CEO/producer Area 35, which is the new name for Tiny Metal Studio. A studio that he was clearly involved with the entire time, but decided to leave his name out of the Kickstarter, most likely due to knowing how fans would react if he was involved in a third Kickstarter after not delivering on Kickstarter 1 and Kickstarter 2 seeing terrible reviews. This was all made official when Tiny Metal was linked back to the Project Phoenix Kickstarter page where they asked for people's support. This game was now the lifeline and saviour. Initially there was of course anger, but some fans tried to give it a go, and they asked Yora if they would be getting a free copy of the game since they backed the Project Phoenix and not gotten anything in return as of yet, or likely never would, to which he said no, they would not be getting a copy of the game and instead would need to buy it just like everybody else.
What?
This of course enraged fans that already had many reasons to be angry.
It's the least they could do.
In order to try to stop the growing hate, Yora posted a message for backers.
Hiroki!
Tiny Metal is our only salvation. With so little resources, many staff from Project Phoenix has toiled to make a simple yet fun little game, and this is our result. If you truly like what we've made, please help us. We need all the help we can get. We don't want your money, we just need you to tell your friends and family. But of course they did want their money, and they wanted their friends and family's money too. Which is why this did not stop the onslaught of fan messages. The situation
it's
in
been
their
like
eyes
4 years.
was very clear.
The bank can't
They
do
took $1 million
nothing.
of their money, wasted much of it, and then used the rest to create an entirely unrelated game. They called him a thief, a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. He of course denied all of this, and for now, it was case closed, because the public would feel cheated no matter what, and the studio would deny all wrongdoings. Without an admission of guilt, an insider, or a forensic accounting of where the money went, nobody could make fact from fiction, so it seemed like it was all over. November 2017, an ex-employee takes to Facebook to air their grievances. Tariq Lacey, who worked at Area 35, made some outrageous claims, backing up the fans' fears as well as their accusations. Quote, "The company's CEO, Hiroaki Yora, asked me to deflect any accusations that this money was from anyone other than private investors. In actuality, Hiroaki only dipped into his funds and asked for money from private investors after the funding that he had secured for Tiny Metal was running low. I refused this request to fabricate and minimize the truth for the purpose of misleading others, then told Hiroaki to remove me from all matters regarding Project Phoenix so that I would not be implicated in this affair. The response to this by fans was of course mutinous. As for Yora's response as the CEO, he came with accusations of his own. He said this was factually incorrect and that the whistleblower had to be bought out of his own contract for, quote, being a toxic employee who was sexually harassing female staff amongst many other problems, a statement which he later apologised for. Now there were rumours in the air that gave credence to fans' fears.
This is crazy.
In order to put all these
Hiroaki,
rumours
what
of
the
fraud or
fuck?
misconduct to bed, Yora took to an interview with GameSpot, where he allegedly shared private documents of financials and investor agreements in order to vindicate himself and his company from wrongdoings. Unfortunately, this GameSpot article does not at any point back up any of the claims made with their assessment on whether or not these documents prove or disprove any claims made or denied. They just state that some documents were shown, which leaves much to be desired in terms of proof and likely changed almost no minds in the court of public opinion. That is, of course, until July 2018, where PC Gamer published an article confirming that previous Facebook whistleblower Tariq Lacey was forced by court-ordered arbitration to issue an apology and retraction for all claims related to embezzlement from Project Phoenix funds to create Tiny Metal in Area 35. This legally vindicated Hiroaki Yora and Studio CIA, though for the sake of clarity, I will give you the opinion of those online. Many people claim that despite this arbitration and court-ordered apology, it could be the case that in the face of legal action, cost and threat, an apology and walkaway was preferred. But as for a legal matter, Yora, CIA and Area 35 are cleared of any and all wrongdoing, despite how the public may feel. Which of course, if you read the comments anywhere about this project, most will be angry, most will call fraud, most will say they were cheated out of their money, and that that money went to create a totally different game. Since there is no compelling conclusion, it's for you to make up your own mind. At the end of it all, despite the apparent success of Tiny Metal, which was claimed to bring life back into the never-risen Phoenix, there has been no progress. The last update on the Project Phoenix Kickstarter was posted on March 26, 2019, in which claims were made of focusing on alternative products before bringing focus back to Project Phoenix. Essentially,
Why won't they
yet
just
again,
finish it?
moving the goalposts further away, into a distance that none of the original backers can even imagine, let alone see. We now end, 10 years later, a decade, $1 million, 16,000 backers, 3 Kickstarters, an anime, an entirely different game, success, and yet no refunds, and certainly no Phoenix. Many of the names associated with the project are now working on bigger and better things, likely never to return to a game that never really seemed to exist in any meaningful way. A dream was presented, money exchanged hands, but only disappointment was returned. This is the story of Project Phoenix, a story that I think we can say is finished, though with Kickstarter shenanigans, I guess you never really know.
Wow. So they
to astronaut training and eventually one.
Oh, it's on a playlist. So they literally just never freaking did it. They never finished it. They never released anything. Never released anything is crazy. And raised $1 million. Like I said, I'd be scared someone would be coming for me. And the people who gave $10,000, what about them? That's insane. $10,000 and you don't get shit. You didn't get anything. Oh my God. That's crazy. Oof. I don't know. I don't know. That is wild. Well, anyway, Yeshi, thank you so much for joining me tonight, being my one and only viewer. I appreciate it. I love these videos. It's hard for me to like not watch them off stream because there's only a few, but they're so good. But I appreciate you hanging out. I'm gonna be live on TikTok and Twitch tomorrow. So you should definitely join that. I think I'm gonna be doing the Raphael 4-star card that's releasing. So that'll be fun. A little bit of reading. But yeah. I know you said it's early, so I hope you do get something to eat. And have some sweet dreams when you go to bed. Okay? I'll talk to you later, darling. Night. Bye. You're excited? Okay, me too, yeah. I know, I really want to just play it by myself, but I'm going to wait till tomorrow. But yeah, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, thank you so much. I had a good night. I already had a good night because I got to spend it with you. All right. Peace, sweet dreams. Bye.